DK Government Solutions LLC is a bipartisan, full-service governmental affairs and lobbying firm that represents many diverse clients. DK Government Solutions LLC was formed in 2000 after managing partner Don Kissell, who served 3 terms in the Missouri legislature. While in the legislature, Don was responsible for 30 bills becoming law. Most notable was the Missouri no-call law. Don's former background prior to becoming a legislator and lobbyist was in law enforcement and later as a successful businessman. Don is going on his 14th year as a legislator or lobbyist in Jefferson City. Thank you for being here, Don.
Thank you, Joe.
Can you please tell our viewers what a lobbyist does in Jefferson City?
Yeah, I think a lot of people have a idea of what exactly a lobbyist is. But a lobbyist is somebody who represents a client on a particular issue and then tries to educate the General Assembly to that client's concerns. What I do many times is go into and start with the client. And a lot of clients have ideas of what they'd like to see passed, like to see bills that are passed. And I try to educate them and say, well, I don't think that's going to happen. We're in a tight budget crunch. I don't see there's going to be extra money available. We may have to come back at different years or maybe a new approach. And then other clients may have something as simple as changing a weed ordinance that's maintained by the state. One of the bills we're working on this year deals with weeds. City of St. Peter's, as one of my clients, has asked that we present legislation that would allow for second and third attempts by the city to have the weeds removed to be expedited. Currently, it takes about 30 days, maybe 45 days, when somebody is notified that, hey, your grass is too tall. Many of these are vacant houses or people have moved out, but your grass is too tall and you need to get it taken care of. By the time the city can actually get in there and work on that grass and cut it, it takes about 30 or 45 days. Comes again later in the same season, we have to do this all over. We have to go through the same process. So one of the things we're trying to work on with the legislature, and I think we'll be successful this year, is second and third attempts will not require the full due process that's given for the first one, but maybe just simply a registered letter. This is going to make a lot of the neighbors happy who have been complaining about tall grass. But this is something that many legislators were not aware of, and I have to go in and I have to educate them and talk to them about it.
Okay. How do you, as a lobbyist, successfully approach a legislator to either start a bill to get processed, get it through the system, or stop a bill?
Well, what I like to do sometimes is find a legislator who has some type of background. I mean, we have 163 legislators in the Missouri House, another 34 in the Senate. We've got a diverse group of people. Another client I represent is the Missouri Police Chiefs. So sometimes when we have law enforcement issues, I either look for people with a law enforcement background or I go to the committee that's made up that's going to hear that piece of legislation. These are people who have, for some reason, have shown that they are interested in public safety or law enforcement, and I will talk to them. I will present to them both sides of the issue and say that we feel this is something that needs to be changed, this is something that needs to be worked on. We're doing a lot this year with a number of issues, everything from the cyberbullying to the DNA profiling and issues like this. So what I try to do is I try to find a legislator who has some type of background, but that doesn't always work. Sometimes it's my job to kind of educate that legislator.
Being a former legislator and a current lobbyist, what are the pros and cons of both?
Well, as a lobbyist, I don't have to worry about elections anymore, so that's probably one of the big things. Being a legislator is an honor. It was a privilege. It was one of the proudest things I've ever done in my life. But as a lobbyist, I still get to be part of the process. I still get to work on legislation. I still get to be involved in a number of issues by talking to members of the Senate, members of the House. One thing to remember is I can't vote anymore, and that's probably the biggest difference is. But I think I enjoy both of them equally.
Okay. Have term limits affect the way lobbyists perform their jobs?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. When I had the honor of serving, there were legislators who had 25 and 30 years and 15 years was not uncommon. So they had some institutional knowledge. So they knew kind of what was going on. They had a background. They were familiar with a number of issues. Because of the way we're made up now, that 4 terms and you're out. A lot of legislators just don't get the opportunity. They don't get the opportunity to be a chairman, which I had the privilege of being. They don't get the opportunity to carry a lot of key pieces of legislation. And again, because of term limits, they're always looking for what's the next position to run for, because you can't sit here and wait, well, I'll just wait another 4 years or 6 years, and maybe then I'll try for the Senate, or maybe I'll go back home and run for another office. So, yes, it has changed the makeup.
Being a former legislator, what's your personal opinion on term limits?
Oh, I think that was probably a big mistake. I think that there's probably a need for term limits. I think 8 years is too small. This all came about in 1994 when many people thought that they were, I think, voting to remove members of Congress. And Congress had made members had presented it that they would have term limits for Congress, which never came about. Your legislator, remember, it's a lot closer. You represent about 36,000 people. You're in the neighborhood. You're not up in Washington, D.C. 9 months out of the year, so you're really in touch. And I always believed that term limits were called elections.
Okay. Recently, Governor Blunt announced he's not seeking re-election. You think this is going to affect the way legislators and lobbyists work together to get their agendas through get them through the process during session?
Well, I think in some ways it will. Many times a piece of legislation takes 2 or 3 years to get through the legislature. Not knowing who is actually going to be the governor next year, I think puts a lot of people in that, hey, I either need to get it pushed now, or maybe if it was opposed, they just back off and say, you know what, I'll bring this back in 2009 and try to pass this legislation. So I think in a lot of ways that us knowing that we're going to have a new governor next time does affect some issues.
Now, were you personally surprised by the governor's announcement not to seek re-election?
Yeah, I guess like many people. I mean, he gave a pretty strong and convincing State of the State address just a few days earlier, and I mean there was nothing. I don't think anybody's seen in that State of the State address that gave any kind of inclination that he was, considering not running, and that he had some ideas and he had some issues that he was still going to present. So I think it did catch a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah, I believe that too. I believe it was a shocking occurrence, because when we heard it, like 10 minutes before the announcement, that's when we were informed, and the Senate heard 15 minutes before the announcement, and I'm not too sure how fast the lobbyist circle heard. Probably
just about the time you were here, and the word was in the halls.
Yeah, at first I thought it was a joke. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Is there anything else you want to talk about about being lobbying in Jeff City or being a former legislator?
No, just that I enjoy doing both. It's a real adventure many times in trying to pass pieces of legislation. I think some of the more fulfilling things as a lobbyist is when you do able to go into a legislator. And what I've always believed is show them both sides. I go into a legislator's office, and if I want them to pass a piece of legislation, I tell them what the opposition is. I want them to know up front that there may be some people opposing it, and maybe for this particular reason, but we still feel strongly that it should be passed, and these are the reasons for it. And then, when that comes to tuition, it is fulfilling. But it's just as fulfilling as a legislator to stand there on the last day of session or something, find out your bill has passed the Senate and it's been third read and finally agreed to, and it's going to the governor's desk. It's a real honor.
All right. Well, Don, thank you for being a part of the show.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you for being here today, and this is Capitol Update.